In this video, I want to be talking a little bit about everyday wellness, and particularly those first few moments when we're waking and we're probably not as energized immediately. We don't wake up with a burst of energy. Sometimes that occasionally happens, but that's rarely the case. It's usually a slow, steady pace, and we decide to get out of bed or wherever we're sleeping and we're resting. And oftentimes, this is because the body is cool and cold. It gets colder when we go to sleep. Our body temperature drops, and we don't have as much blood flow or even oxygen to our brain yet. And we're still sort of energizing those systems that are important for awareness, alertness, and the sense of wakefulness. So I want to talk about a little bit about this slow start, but also how we can energize the body and get more of that wakefulness. And there's various things that we can do. But the two main ones I want to talk about is psychological stimulation and then physical activity, in particular physical activity in a little bit more of a broader scope. And it's probably a little bit harder to just start off with psychological stimulation. You'll probably notice if you're somebody who goes to check your phone and then you see something like a notification or you read something, and it's probably better to do something other than say check social media, but something like reading on your phone or doing something a little bit cerebral, like you might want to practice not necessarily meditation immediately, but a thoughtfulness meditation or thoughtfulness, in which you're self-stimulating a psychological process, and particularly engaging in that psychological stimulation through meaning. Because what you're doing is you're increasing activity to various regions of your brain, which is increasing the metabolism there. And what that does is that's going to start to circulate blood flow as well as neurotransmission involved there. Things like dopamine, acetylcholine, especially if you're processing novelty and new information, integrating that to the meaning systems in your brain. And the dopamine is going to reinforce whatever you find rewarding or not. Like, especially too, if there's like you're reading something and there's a little bit of like an incongruence, like you're expecting something and maybe it's like you think something's a joke and it's not a joke and you're a little bit off put, and that expected reward that's going to circulate from dopamine is going to drop, and then your dopamine level is going to drop, and that anticipated reward is going to lead to like what's going on, a little bit of a crash. You might experience a slightly negative emotion and then pick up again. Um, and then also there's going to be like serotonin that's going to be associated with that regulating your moods, your motivation, your perception, which is going to be very, very vital actually for this early part of waking in the morning, and getting that wakefulness. Not necessarily in the morning, but whenever you wake up, because you can have any schedule of the day. I certainly have had times in my life due to work schedules and school schedules that I've woken up, had to switch my schedule where I'm sleeping basically all day and working all night, and vice versa, where I'm working all day and sleeping all night. I've been through it all pretty much when it comes to that, when it comes to rest. And um, there's going to be a few things important there too. Engaging in psychological stimulation is very important. That's going to vitalize this sense of alertness. Like as you're engaging in particularly the information processing, that meaning processing, say when you're reading, you're going to get increases of epinephrine and norepinephrine based off the contents of your stimulation, what you're thinking about. And there's a slow and steady decline of melatonin as well as adenosine when you're waking up early in the morning, and these will naturally elevate throughout the day, especially as we get tired. Um, they have to do with our sense of energy and our particular sense of psychological energy. And serotonin relates directly to that. It's what supplies us a lot of this psychological energy. But what's also going to be important for that, that's occurring, being released mostly when we're sleeping, is gamma buteic amino acid. It's already kind of done its work as we're waking up. It's really replenished most of our energy, but we're still a little bit stagnant, right? Where there's still a little bit of this weariness. So if you're engaged in an activity, you'll notice within a few minutes you start to get that energy pretty quick, and you scaffold off that GABA with these other neurotransmitters that are becoming active, and you start to metabolize various neurotransmitters in your brain, but also are producing greater activity in various regions of the brain. So there's more communication there, and that's causing your body to circulate increased blood flow, and that's going to be moving throughout the body. And the brain's a massive center. It consumes the most resources in the body, and it's a massive center for our metabolism and metabolizing our energy. So it's going to really start to charge us up and to energize us and increase a sense of alertness. It's going to accompany various uh, neurotransmitters that are being released, such as epinephrine, norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, glutamate, and GABA. So in this case, when you're engaged in psychological stimulation, there's probably going to be less activation of those centers, unless you're doing like you're expressing yourself in various ways, and you're going to see like some glutamate activation within the facial muscles. It's more of an excitatory neurotransmitter that pertains primarily to muscle movements and motor learning. So you'll still have activation of that in various regions of the body, but it's less frequent than if we go to say physical activity. And a couple of things that you can do to really wake yourself up is you can start by stretching, and stretching is a good segue and a good balance between the say psychological stimulation as well as physical exercise. They both do different things, but stretching really has a balance between those. So you'll see more of an activation throughout various neurotransmitters, including glutamate, but also GABA. A lot of GABA. So GABA is important for things like mindfulness and thoughtfulness in these states of relaxation, calmness, and focus attention too, which also plays a massive role in learning and problem solving and analogic problem solving and creativity. But it's more of a long term, has more of these long term effects, and we don't necessarily notice them immediately. They're more gradual and progressive, and they develop our uh, uh, psychological energy in that manner. Whereas serotonin is more of an immediate source of psychological energy, as well as neuroepinephrine and epinephrine, but they pertain more to wakefulness and arousal in particular, and that motivates us. It fuels our perceptions of recognition, awareness, even acuity. Particularly acuity is very important there, and uh, our emotions, our feelings, our actions, and our behaviors as well. Um, so when we're stretching, we're very much engaging our body in various ways that's starting to get blood flow to move there, but is also activating various regions in our brain that's associated with this higher order uh, processing that requires greater metabolizing of various neurotransmitters and hormones, and which is signaling the body to increase blood flow, particularly to the regions of the brain. That's occurring more through a top down association. Top down has to do with our thought processes, what we're perceiving in particular, and how that impacts our precepts and our sense of our body, our motor sense, our visual sense, our auditory sense, our olfactory sense, which is going to be in the nose, smell, and our gustatory sense, which is the tongue. I often tend to mix those two up because they're very much intimately linked, the olfactory and the gustatory sense and field. There's a gusto-olfactory fields that are connected, and you'll notice often sometimes when you smell something, you predict the taste of it, and vice versa. When you taste something, you can predict the smell. They're very, very close together, and they're very closely associated, much like the vestibular system that I've talked about that's combining visual processing, auditory processing, as well as motor processing and proprioception, which is our sense of self and space. Anyway, going back to stretching, it has more of this nice balance, even flow of that's important for wakefulness as it's releasing more of this balanced amount of neurotransmitters, such as glutamate, which is associated more with those motor activations and processes that are going to be focused in various regions of the body. But at the same time, you have GABA that's important for that consolatory period, and that's really key. That's really what has a massive impact in improving the flexibility in stretching. it's both the release of glutamate and GABA that are simultaneously occurring, because GABA tends to play a larger role in terms of repairing and doing that development, while glutamate mostly just plays a role at the onset of that, which is associated with the motor actions and to some degree the motor learning and the calibration of those movements. And at the same time, when you're stretching, you have focal attention that's going to be associated with that acuity that's coming primarily from epinephrine, but also norepinephrine, which to some degree is releasing arousal in those particular regions. So you'll have increased blood flow. And we also have serotonin that's going to be associated with our perceptions and to some degree our motivations um, regarding that release. And that's also giving us a boost of psychological energy at the same time. And we can have dopamine in that mix too, which is more associated with predictive reward and anticipatory reward, and also error too, error process. So there's negative emotion there too, positive negative emotion, positive negative affect, motivation to some degree. In this case, probably a limited degree in stretching. But once we engage in something that's a little bit more active, like physical activity, and I would suggest doing like a leg pump where you're really getting your calves going. Because what that's going to do is it's going to start to circulate blood flow throughout your body and oxygen too. So you're supplying your body with two other sources of energy and resources that are very, very important for increasing wakefulness across the mind and body. And here, this is really, really important for getting hormones such as brain-derived neurotrophic factor, as well as nerve growth factor, and that GABA is going to play a role in learning and memory to help with the consolidation and long-term learning and development, and also repairing the body and improving our well-being through essentially, your leg pumping, but you're pumping all these hormones and distributing them more ubiquitously across the body rather than just concentrating in the head. So that's important. They go hand in hand too. So when you're engaged in a thoughtful exercise, and then you're also engaged in this more manual way of waking yourself up, you can really start to compound these effects and optimize your well-being through a little bit of some physical activity and combining that with psychological stimulation. Or you can, getting started, if you're getting started and you're having difficulty doing it, it's probably better to pick one. And I would suggest probably doing something a little bit more cerebral, like psychological stimulation, or starting with mindfulness and then scaffolding your way up to a mindful thoughtfulness, and then even incorporating eventually some stretches or exercises, whatever you're more comfortable doing. Um, I personally like to do more go for a walk. It's one of the things I've been doing consistently, or meditate immediately. Those tended to be the first things I started off with. And now I tend to do a combination of them all at fairly consistently and to an intermittent rate. But you'll find that as you engage in at least one, just pick one. It's a great start. Um, you'll be doing multiple in no time, a few months, and then even if you stop, you'll find in a couple of years you become more consistent, and that just snowballs and it develops and it gets better and better. So I hope you enjoy.